you really have to be an advocate for yourself. And you mentioned this before, you have to be an advocate for yourself because the system is not designed to get to the root of the problem.
Hello and welcome back to Thrive with Sharon podcast. I am Sharon Land and I am your host. I am also a metaphysician, a holistic psychotherapist in the state of New Jersey, and an internationally recognized healer. And I am still on my mission to bring as many people in front of us in our audience and community that can help us to understand all of the different ways that we can actually optimize our health and be well. And today I'm really excited because through his wife, actually, we were connected, and Dr. Doug Lucas is with us today on the podcast. And just a real quick introduction to Dr. Doug is he's actually a board certified orthopedic surgeon, and he left the traditional medical model to build a practice for health optimization, which when Ashley told me about that, I was like, yes, we need more highly educated individuals to come and really help us with that holistic piece. So he specializes in metabolic health, hormone optimization for both men and women, and osteoporosis and longevity. So Dr. Doug aims to address the underlying causes of chronic disease to improve both health span and lifespan, which I think is such a great point for us to start to talk about that and the differentiation between the two. But Dr. Doug, I just want to welcome you to the Thrive with Sharon podcast and to the community. I'm so excited for people to know you. I have really enjoyed getting to know all of the ways and nuances that you're really out there serving. So thank you and welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm really looking forward to this.
Yeah, well, it's really my pleasure. And in our prep for the show, I said, the most important thing is that I want us to be able to allow curiosity to guide some of our conversation. And so one of the things for me is in my experience, and I've had a long history of some having to deal with some health issues in my younger years, a lot of autoimmune diseases. And so for me, what I've learned through my lens is that there are a lot of correlation between traumatic experiences that we've had earlier on in life that have kind of shown up in our physical health. So I'm wondering, just starting maybe from that discussion point, how much you're seeing that and how much you're actually allowing for in your practice to help the holistic piece.
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's a really hard one. I was thinking, actually, I was listening to some of your podcast earlier, and I was thinking about this specific thing. So it's funny that you brought it up right away. But I was thinking about when I was an orthopedic surgeon, when I was practicing full time and doing the things that surgeons do, which is operate on people. I would see people come in and frequently they would have, I was a foot and ankle subspecialist. So, this kind of vague foot pain. It's almost like a diagnosis in and of itself, vague foot pain.
Yeah.
And how many times at that time I would have never thought of this, but I'm wondering now how many times, do we do the diagnostic workup and we get the x-rays and you get the MRI and you say, well, yeah, I mean, you've got a little bit of arthritis in here and, you got a little bit of this. Like we can always find something, especially in the foot. And a lot of times those are the patients where you say, look, yes, we can do this surgery and I can make you different, but I don't know that I'm going to make you better because your symptoms don't really correlate with this thing. But then you do say like a diagnostic procedure, like an injection, but anything can act like a placebo. So anything can make something better about half of the time. Right. And so you do an injection and they get a little bit better, then it comes back because you didn't fix the problem.
Right.
And then they go on to have surgery because the injection helps. So then surgery should help, but then the surgery doesn't work. And so I wondered how many times in those scenarios was I just trying to treat the wrong thing because I was treating what showed up. It was indicated, but that wasn't the underlying thing. I have no idea how many times that happened.
Right.
But in my own life, I actually had a similar situation where I had this, it's kind of a long story, but let's just call it shoulder pain. that really got worse over the last year. And then about 6 weeks ago, it just went away like that. And I did the full workup, MRI, X-rays. I probably, I don't know, 6 injections. Like I can inject it myself. So just that kind of thing. And the injections would help a little bit, but then it would come back. And
Mm.
then I kind of had this emotional breakthrough, and it really allowed it to just release and go away. Woke up one
Oh.
day when it's gone. So I think about my patients now, and yes, we tried to address all these things.
Mm.
It really falls into the coaching side. My time with the patient, depending on kind of how they're working with me, my time with the patient is really driven around test results and creating a plan. I do some of my own, what I call physician level coaching, which is basically just if you want to talk to me more. And in that scenario, we can try to get into it, but I don't have the training to really do it. But I do recognize, and I can tell people, hey, look, you have this pain, or you have this experience, and the doctor in the traditional medical model has worked you up, and everything seems to be negative. This is really common in back pain too. Everything
Yes.
seems to be negative. Maybe we should look somewhere else. But then my challenge, and this is my question back to you, is
Mm.
where do I send these people?
Mm.
Who is the right person? I mean, maybe it's you, but who is the right person to say, hey, let's explore, could this be coming from some underlying emotional situation or some historic trauma? Because that's
Mm.
really hard to unearth, especially in the physician or the coach setting.
Yeah, and I understand. I understand, and actually, the thing that I love hearing in your question is the fact that you're maintaining some integrity of right person for the right job,
Oh,
and
absolutely.
understanding that there's always more than one solution. And many times it's never just like a very, binary thing where it's just like, here's my problem, here's your solution, which is just really more of that Western medicine model, right? Where we have that
Mhm.
diagnostic approach, like let's find something to diagnose so that we can then create the treatment around that. And so for me, I always say, I receive a lot of my patients and clients come to me because they've tried all of these other things and it hasn't worked, and things continue to progress because the body just continues to amplify its voice in many ways, right? And so they finally just say, well, now I'm, completely lost and hopeless, and I need help. And so we start to peel away the layers of the onion, and we do find that there's always typically something emotional underneath, and definitely trauma is directly correlated to a lot of physical and medical
Mhm.
conditions. But I do think that it's a team approach that is best, right?
Mhm.
Because I'm also not a trained and licensed medical doctor, and I always say that. And a lot of my patients say, like in a message to me, Sharon, not the doctor. I just have this question for you, because I say it all of the time. And I think that's really important for us to say, like, this is where I'm coming from. This is my perspective. This is my approach. And I also suggest always to make sure that you have someone, a doctor, someone who is a specialist, who is also on your team that you feel can support you in this, right? And that we need to all, like you and I, as practitioners, learn how to be able to cross pollinate and to work
Mhm.
together from a position of service, as opposed to a position of like, and I'm not saying this is you, but a lot of people work on amplifying their brand and
Right.
monetizing things, and it's backwards, right? We have it backwards, where it's like, if you provide the service and if you create good connections and network, then like you won't, you'll just continue to expand, right? So
Mhm.
I don't know if that directly answered your question, but I feel like that's an important piece to kind of like drop in there.
Mhm. Yeah, I do find it's challenging, especially coming out of my wife's space, which I worked with her in her business, which is in the weight loss world, and there's a very challenging space to be cooperative because everybody has their product, right?
Right.
And so what I love about the space that I'm in now is that I don't know anybody that does what I do the way I do it.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
not to say that there aren't other functional medicine practitioners and other people out there, but the way that we provide this really comprehensive approach, which I'm sure we'll get into, like, I'm not afraid to even go out and put it. I'm actually working on a program to put us into physician offices, right? To say,
I
look,
love
this is
that.
what we do. If you find somebody that needs these services, then let's figure out a way that we can have a coordinated care agreement, and we have that in place, and we're just now getting ready to launch it. And when I told my team about it, they said, but wait, if you tell them what we do, they'll take it. I said,
Right.
no, they're not.
Yeah.
They don't want to do what I do. Like, I love what I do, but
Yeah.
none of my orthopedic surgeon friends want to know anything about hormones or want to know anything about how to manage, all the things that go along with that. They just don't want to have that conversation. And I get that.
Mm.
That's totally fine. I never
Mhm.
thought I would be having these conversations either, but here we are, right? This is my path. And so
Right.
I would love to find the people that I can connect with, and my connections are always getting bigger and broader. And we have on
Mm.
our website, we call it the toolbox, where all the different people that we can send people to, and different services and modalities. Like,
Mhm.
it is so broad, and the technology is so great. There's so much that we can do. um,
Mhm.
but but yeah, I love just sticking in my lane and saying, look, this is what we do, and this is what we do really well.
Yeah, yeah, and however, what you do crosses so many different borders, right? Like you really can take you'd spoken to it earlier with just like looking at the pathologies of the lab work and testing, but you're not doing traditional testing from that Western medical model. So I want to, maybe we can start there, right? So
Hmm.
because there's so many things that we can spiral into in the way that you go about helping to optimize people's health. So maybe is that where you start with your practice? Is you start with the testing?
Hmm. Yeah, so we always start with learning about people. Now, the testing, because the testing process takes a few weeks, we actually start by asking a lot of questions about the patient. So, of course,
Mm,
there's the form that you fill out, like the thing.
mhm,
But then you actually meet with somebody on the team, and usually our
mm,
director of coaching is the one that sits down, talks with you for an hour, and just goes over, all your lifestyle pillars. Let's talk about your
mhm,
sleep and your movement, and what are your goals, and what are you eating, and how are you mitigating your stress. All of
mhm.
that stuff is critical. And then we get blood work, which is, yes, your doctor also gets blood work, right? But our blood panel, if you look at the numbers, it is what I call an extensive blood panel. People kind of make fun of me because when they go to give the blood, they feel like they've just been drained of all their blood. Because it's a fair amount of blood. I
Yes.
promise that you're not going to pass out. Well, you might, but not because of the volume. And so yeah, so we get a lot of metrics, and then we also add on this functional testing layer.
Mm,
And what I mean by functional testing are things that the traditional medical model wouldn't pursue. So, for
right.
example, like gut testing for food intolerances, which isn't really the right word, but it's what everybody knows. Um, Stool testing to look at gut function, not a fun one, right? But something that's really, really helpful depending on what's going on. Looking at your
Mhm,
adrenal glands very specifically, and
mm,
just basically trying to figure out what's happening at the organ level, rather
mm.
than just getting, a broad blood test that you would get and say, this looks a little off. I don't know what's wrong. So we just get very, very granular with our testing early on.
I love that because again, I deal with people who have a lot of mystery illnesses, right? And things that, for a very extreme kind of effects on their quality of life. And it you do have to get granular on it because again, for instance, something along the lines of like an A1C level, right? Which is a very common test that people are administered and just check to see if their blood sugars are okay. Um,
Hmm.
but that doesn't necessarily indicate whether or not the person is having like swings, right?
Totally.
Because we could have highs and lows all day long. They're passing out because of a huge plummet in their glycemic index, right?
That's
Or
right.
whatever. And but they go back to the doctor and the doctor's like, well, I don't know, there's something wrong,
Yeah, your
because
A1C
the
looks fine.
A1C level's fine,
Yeah,
right? And meanwhile,
yeah,
like, are you kidding me? And so I'll say, get your hands on, a testing kit and test throughout the day so you
yeah.
have different evidence. And the numbers are like I just got numbers from 480,
Wow.
480 in an
Yeah.
adolescent,
Ooh.
right? So, but they've been to the doctor 3 times, and each time the doctor's like, "Nope."
Yeah. Oh,
You
that's
know?
rough.
So so I love the fact that you're talking about really getting deeper and into the testing and testing different things. But so what does that look like from the hormonal standpoint, or,
Mhm.
what types of tests are you talking about?
Yeah, so I just want to take one step back and talk about the diabetes thing real quick, because this is something that just it is. Yeah, you mentioned it in your intro. Metabolic health is one of my passions, and I really picked that up by working with my wife.
Mm,
If you if all your doctor is testing is A1C, or even if all they're testing is just your fasting blood sugar, you're
mhm.
missing the big picture. And I
Yes,
know you know this, but let me just spell it out for your listeners.
please.
So the problem of diabetes is really a spectrum that starts with what's called insulin resistance very, very early on.
Yes.
Insulin being the hormone that helps your body to dispose of glucose, which is carbohydrate as it's metabolized. People can have insulin resistance and carbohydrate intolerance and be normal weight, have
Mhm.
not elevated blood sugar and not elevated A1C, and start to actually get symptoms of diabetes, meaning you can get
Mhm.
neuropathy, you can get, which
Yes.
is a nerve problem, retinopathy, eye problems.
Mhm.
You can start to get kidney problems before you ever see elevations in blood sugar.
Yes.
So by the time you're seeing an elevated fasting glucose, you've had this problem for probably a long time. Now, the pediatric patient that you're talking about, I mean, that's scary because that's happened really fast. So there's something really wrong there.
Mhm.
So when we test those patients, we're getting an A1C because I do want to know what that is, but we're also getting not only the fasting glucose, but we're also getting an insulin level, which is
Right.
very rarely tested in people. So a fasting insulin level tells you so much. And then I was just working up a patient's report right before we hopped on this call. And she has these kind of rapidly fluctuating blood glucose, and she's her A1C is a little bit high. It's not actually pre-diabetic, but she's right below that. So my recommendation is, instead of sticking your finger, which is a good option, but people tend to not do it, to use something called a CGM, if you're familiar with that,
Yeah.
the continuous glucose monitor, which is
Uh-huh.
such a great
It's
tool.
so good.
Mhm.
It's so
And
good.
so yeah, so if anybody is in that group, just definitely know there's more to learn and more to figure out. And don't forget that diabetes can be, if you have diabetes, it can be put in remission. And if you're not there yet, it can go away
100%.
completely. Right. This is not
100%.
a medical problem that needs to persist in your life, and definitely not in our culture at all. But yet it
Mhm.
is, over half the population, which is amazing.
Right. Half, 50% of the population. I mean,
Diabetic
that's
and
big.
pre-diabetic, yeah, over 50% of the population. If you don't have pre-diabetes or diabetes, you are now in the minority in our country. How's that?
Right.
Yeah. So then, to actually answer your question, we get into hormone testing because hormone optimization is a huge part of what we do. Everything that I just mentioned, actually not so much diabetes, but all the others, hormones drive a huge component of that when you talk about sex hormones. So we do
Mhm.
that through blood testing for sure, and that's the gold standard. But there are also other ways to measure hormones, and some hormones are better measured through other avenues like urine or potentially saliva. So like
Mhm.
cortisol, one of your stress hormones, better measured through saliva. We
Mhm.
measure it in blood too. Estrogen metabolism, for our peri and postmenopausal people. Um,
Ding.
I don't know how much you talk about your health on your podcast.
I don't mind.
Um,
I've
yeah,
it's all out there. Yeah.
yeah, it's looking at estrogen metabolism can help explain not only symptoms of perimenopause and menopause, actually in premenopausal women too,
Mhm.
but also your risk for developing breast cancer, and especially if you're considering replacement, knowing
Mhm.
how you're metabolizing and where you can be helped in the metabolism of your estrogen can actually decrease your risk of developing breast cancer with or without
Yes.
replacement. Yeah,
That's okay. You just ran through that fast, but that is a life-changing fact.
yeah, absolutely.
I mean, one of the things, especially, well, anyone, doesn't matter if you have a body, you have to be worried about breast cancer. It's not just women or people who identify as feminine, right? So it's anyone has runs that risk, and
Mhm.
the underlying issues. Of course, we have some genetics, right? We do have to take into account some of the genetics, but for me, what my experience has shown and what my training has shown is that, yes, there is that piece, but it's a very small percentage,
Mhm.
right? Really, more of what contributes to those factors are, especially when it comes to things like breast cancer, are the fact that it's the environment, it's the diet, it's the culture, it's the structure of the, how our lifestyles.
Yeah.
And so we're energetically repatterning those same things, right? And even how we deal with stress and all of the different ways that we kind of go out into the world. And so that predisposes us towards leaning more towards potentially having that experience of disease.
That's right. Yeah, and to just put it all on one molecule and say, "Oh, well, taking this thing is going to increase your risk," is really, yes, you can say that, but there are so many factors, particularly with cancer.
Mm,
And and it was really unfortunate what happened in the early 2000s with the research around hormones, that when they came out with the study, the big study that kind of blew the top off of hormones was the Women's Health Initiative. And when that came out in the early 2000s, it scared millions of women off
yeah.
of their estrogen replacement and caused who knows how much harm, right? I mean, ripping all these women off of their estrogen, the symptoms that associated with it, and then the disease as a result of being estrogen deficient. I mean, it's terrible. And now, the research that's been done over the last 20 years has really shown that the risk is really not there. There is a risk, but it is much lower than it was ever anticipated.
Mhm.
And if done correctly, it can actually prevent or at least reduce your risk. So you can have a less than average risk of breast cancer when it's done the right way through a bioidentical pathway. But I counsel people through this. We spend a lot of time talking about the risks and the benefits because there are some risks, particularly if you've been several years after the onset of menopause.
Right.
There are other risks aside from breast cancer, but it's something that we always have to deal with. And the reality is it's so common. 1 in 7 women will develop breast cancer, right? So it is so common that I put people on estrogen every day. So some of those women will develop breast cancer, right? And so it's
Mhm.
a
Mhm.
difficult conversation to have both before and after. Or
Mhm.
the flip side of that is a woman who has had breast cancer who
Mm.
now has, let's say she comes in. I just had this conversation earlier this week. Woman who had breast cancer, she is on an estrogen blocking drug as part of her chemo, her long-term plan for
Right.
chemo, and now she has terrible osteoporosis, which is loss of bone quality and quantity, and,
Right.
and it's driven a lot of it's driven by lack of estrogen.
Right.
So she asks me, she's like, can you work with me? And I said, well, I can, but I can't prescribe you estrogen, right? Like I can't give you estrogen,
Right.
which your doctor is intentionally blocking because you had a hormone sensitive breast cancer. Like that's a really tough problem. But that's a
Mhm.
really rare scenario, and most women would benefit from it, or actually all women would benefit from it, but most women do not have those risks and would be fine to go ahead and start it. But it's a got to be a case by case decision.
Right, exactly. And we're always, I think, as just a collective society, I think we're so driven towards things being packaged, right? So
Hmm.
we like to hear what somebody else's experience is and then automatically apply that to, well, that's the way it's going to be for me. And so, like you said, when some sort of an organization comes out with some sort of study, then automatically we think, well, then that means that I can't or I can. And it really does limit ourselves from looking at our own unique presentation of whatever our landscape is, right? So on the one end, and many times we're being commoditized, right? Because we're like being put into a box. So it's easier to kind of like, okay, it's easier to solve for X. But and then on the other side, we're also buying into the the commoditization, right? But that's the thing that I like about what I'm hearing from you is that in your practice, what you've developed is the true diagnostic piece where you go deep, right?
Hmm.
You really look at things from a functioning level of the organ, right? And then on top of it, you allow for discussion because everybody, we're nobody is an expert on, so we go through so many milestones in our lives, right? As individuals, and like as a woman growing up, I know that we spent some time learning about, what's going to happen to our bodies next, right? So that usually typically
Mhm.
is, development and having your, menstruation and cycle and all of that stuff. But from there, it's just like, well, have fun, right? Um, and so we're not really prepared for then how to be well and how to be healthy once we get past a certain point in our lives, right?
Sure.
And so when something happens and when something comes up, and so usually people land in your office when they're starting to have an issue. They usually land in my office when they start to have an issue. And so they're not the experts. And even if they do, WebMD and Google search here and YouTube videos there, they're still really not the expert on the subject of whatever the issue is. And so to have that consultation and to have that collaborative discussion and be able to ask questions and make choices, it sounds like, based upon what's good is such a I I know you know this, but I just want to say, like, it is such an important piece to all of our health and to us really being our own, like, our best advocates, because it's hard
Yeah.
to advocate for ourselves when we don't know what we're fighting against.
Yeah, no, I think the education piece is huge. And this is where the medical system, and I want to just take a step back and just say that I don't just harp on the medical system and say that it's all terrible and it's all bad, because
We need it.
there are so many great things that happen
Yes.
in the medical system every second of every day.
Yeah.
But there are common trends that leave certain gaps that need to be filled. And
Yeah.
this is why I do what I do. But
Yeah.
I just want to know, I'm not disparaging the whole system, and I'm not disparaging doctors. But what has happened, and I've kind of watched this through my career, which is, when I started training, I saw doctors who had, it was still short, but they had 15 minutes, right, for a
Yeah.
patient, and then they had 30 minutes for a new patient, right? And so you could actually have a conversation in that period of time. By the time I hit practice, I mean, I was seeing, I was a hospital employee, and the expectations were to see 50 to 60 patients a day. I would have probably 3 to 4 minutes to sit down with a patient, and I'm somebody who's interested in nutrition. I'm trying to
Yeah.
counsel people in that
Yeah.
time, and my clinic would get behind and people would get upset, right? Because I'm actually talking to diabetics about what carbohydrates are, you know, and that has just gone away. So the idea that you need to educate and then co-share a decision with a patient is just, it's ludicrous. If you have 3 to 4 minutes, you can't. You have to
Yeah.
go in and you have to say, look, you have this problem, we're going to do this, sign on the dotted line, see you later, bye. Maybe if you're lucky, hey, here's a handout that has the risks and benefits, see ya, bye, gotta go.
Right.
And usually you don't get that. So I love, in this model, when I sit down with a patient, we sit down for an hour, right, and we're going over stuff, and I'm educating them about, okay, you want to talk about hormone replacement, great, so
Mm.
let's go through all the risks, let's go through all the benefits, tell me about, your aunt that had breast cancer, do you know anything about it,
Mhm.
and just talk about all these things, and then they feel very empowered. And even
Yes.
so, this is a great example. So I've had patients who come in because they don't want to be on a medication. Let's call it an osteoporosis medication, or sometimes it's something for autoimmunity. I see a lot of these patients too.
Mhm.
We go through the whole workup. We try to find the underlying cause. And sometimes you come out on the other end and they still actually need the medication. Like we're not always 100% successful in reversing everything, right? Some things are
Right?
just too far gone. Or like bone
Yes.
health is a great example where the risk of fracture is so high that a
Yeah.
pharmaceutical makes sense. But now they look at that drug and they understand why. They're like, okay, no,
Right.
now I get it, right? I'm doing all these
Mhm.
things. I'm on this path, but if I don't take this drug, I'm at such a high risk of fracturing that, it's going to have these implications. So then they take the medication and they actually feel good about it, right? So
Right.
now they understand it. But to get there took, it took 6 months, and it took a lot of testing
Mhm.
and time and conversations, which
Mhm.
you just can't do in the traditional medical model with the way that it's built now.
No, it's never the people. I always say I believe in the goodness and kindness of every single person. I think that we're all really trying to do our best. And, your reflection of when you were working in the hospital, to think about the fact that the surgeries that you did, or how maybe that didn't need to happen, or some of the underlying reasons behind it, that we do our best with what we have, right? And what we know. But as soon as we know better,
Right.
then we have the opportunity to be able to do better. And I think that you're taking the time and investing in each individual. It it just it provides such an amazing momentum in their empowered health decisions across the board. Um, we see this all the time, where when somebody feels like they're understood, then it totally changes the
Mhm.
entire picture for them, right? Um, we all want to feel empowered on some level. I think oppression is a real thing. And I think that it affects people in so many different ways. And I also think about the cultural context as well, right? The accessibility to the proper help that we really need, and the educational piece. So it's so wonderful that we actually have people like you who have made the decision to really not go against what something is that you've learned, but you're expanding it so you're doing it better, right? Which is really, in a lot of ways, what I've done. Is, there is this traditional model, and it works for some, but it doesn't work for everyone. And I also know how it didn't work for me. So I'm mindful of saying, okay, so how can we do this better? How can we really help people heal, as opposed to just provide a cure? And I actually just did a post on that today, right? So it's just like there's such a difference between curing something, and you said, we could try this, but it may not fix the problem, something else may happen. um and from a spiritual perspective, one of the spiritual teachers that I study with, he said, you never want to cut the tail off of the snake, right? So because
Mhm.
if it doesn't matter how much of the tail you see, you're not getting the whole
That's
snake,
right. Yeah.
right? So sometimes when you do that, it can create an adverse effect to you, in the long run. So to make that little extra effort, and maybe not so little, but bigger effort,
Yeah.
to really just take your time. And if it takes 6 months, then it takes 6 months, but you know that you've arrived at the absolute best decision for you now,
That's right.
right?
That's right. Yeah. I mean, I watch people with difficult problems come out kind of resolved on the other side and say, okay, well, now I understand this better, with all
Hmm.
the education and all the things that we've worked on. And we're identifying a lot of other stuff along the way. So a lot of other things are going to feel better, but
Hmm.
they get this resolve around, okay, this is where I am.
Hmm.
I feel good about this thing that I have, and how I'm going to deal with it. This is just my story, right?
Right.
And it's the empowerment is awesome, and I really enjoy that component of it. But it
Hmm.
is, it's 6 months, it's 12 months. I mean, right now we basically, when we onboard people at this point, we ask them to commit to 12 months, because it takes
Hmm.
6 months to make a change, and then retest, and then make sure that you're doing the right thing. So it really
Hmm.
is, we are asking people to commit to themselves and to trust us in the process, and just to
Mhm,
kind of work through these things. And what we're
mhm,
finding too, now that we've been open for a couple of years, is that people are going through this time frame, and then they recognize the value, and they just want to keep doing it. Like, let's just keep this added layer on top of my healthcare,
right.
because and for those that didn't see that, I was doing air quotes.
Yeah.
My health, because our
Yeah.
healthcare system is really not a healthcare system. So we want this, I call it health optimization, this layer on top of the traditional system, which is really, I
Yes.
call it sick care or symptom care, or
Yes.
cutting the tail off the snake care.
Yeah.
But if you're not getting to the head of the snake, you're really probably just creating more problems.
Mm-hmm.
And you really have to be an advocate for yourself. And you mentioned this before, you have to be an advocate for yourself because the system is not designed to get to the root of the problem. And you could say maybe there's some malfeasance there where they want you to stay sick. And I don't know if that's true at some level, but I don't think it's through the doctor level, but
No,
maybe this the
system.
higher up somewhere, right? Like if
Mm,
you're a sick population, they're going to make money off of you, which is true. So you have to be an advocate for yourself and
mhm,
recognize that, nobody wants to pay for you to be well because nobody makes money on somebody who is independent, autonomously thinking and well.
mhm,
And
mhm.
so we want to, if you want to be those things, which I think we probably all do, if you want to be those things, you really have to drive it yourself.
100%. And the thing, so personal reflection is that when I decided to um, add another layer onto the services that I provided and become a licensed therapist, I committed that I was not going to work with insurance at all.
Hmm.
Right. Because of the fact that as soon as you say yes to that, it's like such a domino effect in so many
Hmm.
different ways. And it takes away the ability to provide the care that you really know needs to be provided. And also for it just affects things on so many different levels, right?
Yeah.
So from an energetic, a spiritual perspective, a personal beliefs perspective, and also I don't believe that saying yes to something that doesn't work, that is saying in so many different ways that we're going to dictate what your value is, we're going to dictate what the as a practitioner as well as the value of the patient, and but we're going to be the ones who get the lion's share of all the benefit of all of that. And it's just like, are
Right.
you kidding?
Yeah.
That's just like, and why are we fighting to maintain that? So it is an investment. It is an investment on so many different ways because you're investing in doing something different than the structure and the foundation that's been laid down for us to kind of blindly walk through, right? To make
Hmm.
things easy. So it's definitely more challenging for people because you kind of feel like you're jumping out of an airplane without a parachute, right? Because you're just like,
Right.
well, I don't know. This is really foreign to me. I don't like, wait a second, no insurance, who is the governing body, whatever. But there are incredible ways then that you can become super creative with your patients so that you
Right.
can help them to get to the root cause, which is the most important part because, you know, you said it. I believe in a multi-pronged approach. And I think that we definitely need, especially I call it almost like emergency medicine, right? You kind of said that in not so many words, where it's like, wait until something's broken and then we'll repair it. And of course, the literal broken arm, you need support for that, right? You need a
Hmm.
trained medical doctor to help you with that, unless you're on like, the Survivor show. You're so stuck somewhere in an island. Like it benefits you to have that emergency medical care. And to your point, sometimes because we just don't know, and we've also been living the best we can with what we have and our resources that we have, and we're not aware of maybe some of the foods that we're eating that are deficient in certain minerals, or the amount of stress that we're under as we're working in our jobs, and how all of that actually affects our physical body, because many of us are very disconnected from our physical bodies, right?
Oh yeah. Hmm.
um, that we do come to a point where there are things that may be past a point of complete restoration, right? And of course, I believe in the possibility of any and all things being healed, but
Hmm.
there's also that possibility. So for me, I had undiagnosed celiac all of my life, right? So I didn't find out until I was um, 37, 38, somewhere around
Wow.
there, right? So by that time, there was already so much physical damage to the physical body, right?
Yeah,
That
for sure.
I've spent years, decades, healing that. And I realized that I'm always going to have to support my liver. I'm always going to have to give extra support to my adrenals, right? Like I'm always going to have to
Hmm.
give extra support to my gut health. And so I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that. And sometimes that might need medication, and there's no shame in medication if we
Yeah.
really truly need it. And sometimes that just means putting a little extra effort in how you actually structure your day, how you live your
Oh
life,
yeah. Right.
right?
Yeah. Well, and people I love it's actually my diabetics is another great story about diabetes, is that people say, well, I don't want to restrict my carbohydrates. And I say, well, it's fine. You don't have to, but you will then have to take medication to control your intolerance to carbohydrates and likely insulin. And yes, it will escalate. And I think you know what the complications are from that. And they look at and they can be very frustrated and they can feel like they're a victim of it.
Mm,
But I just say, look, this is your story. This is how you have gone from, when you were born to now.
right,
You have developed this intolerance and you didn't know it. It's not your fault, but
right.
the foods that you were sold from our food system were very damaging to your system. And this is
Mhm,
where you are. So you
mhm,
can put this thing in remission and you can choose to eat this way, and you cannot have all the complications of diabetes. If you don't eat it, it goes away. It's like it never existed, right? But you have to follow the eating plan.
Yes.
And I've actually had some patients. I have one right now who, man, she's right on the fence, and so she just kind of like she'll just go back, and I'll look at her numbers, and I'm like, why is your blood sugar 300? Like, she's like, well, I just really had to have that cupcake, and I'm like, what? If that's your choice, right? Like, if you want to live that way, then you will need insulin to control your blood sugar. And this is your choice. I'm not going to tell you that it's wrong.
Mhm,
But you don't feel then as if you have been harmed, by anything other than your mind
mhm,
and your decision making. You have
mm,
free will to make this decision. So
mhm.
yeah, it's really interesting to watch people kind of figure out, where they want to draw the line in the sand. And that's I'm here to help them. That's my role, is to be the guide for them on that. I wanted to
Yeah.
touch base too on the insurance thing, because this is something that's really important. As I know you have a global audience, so it's different in every country. In the United States, insurance companies rule everything. Or actually, I
Mhm.
should say hospitals and insurance companies rule everything.
Yeah.
And if you are a part of that system, they will dictate how you practice, just period.
Yep.
And so when I created this practice, I looked at the options and I
Mm,
thought about creating a hybrid model. But the reality is, once you're in the system, then they will dictate how you practice. They will dictate how
mhm.
long they pay for you to see a patient. They
Yep.
will dictate how much. They will make it very challenging to get reimbursed for, especially the functional
Mhm.
testing, which
Oh,
they may or they may not cover. It
right.
basically makes it impossible to have a transparent conversation with a patient about cost.
Mhm,
So rather than doing that, I don't take insurance either. And I just
mhm.
explain, look, we are that extra level of care. This is an investment. This is a cash price. We offer financing if you need that. But
Right.
we cannot do this through insurance. And all the time people, well, but if you just give me the list of your labs, then my doctor will run them. Like, well, first of all, they won't, because they don't know how to read them. And even if
Right.
they do, your insurance company may not cover it. And then you'll actually end up paying more, but you
Mhm.
won't know until after it's done. And then you can't go back. And so I just have kind of drawn the line after going back and forth and
Yeah.
just said, look, no, the answer is no.
Yeah.
This is a cash pay thing.
It's
And
such a mindset. I'm sorry, go ahead.
yeah, well, I was, I think about this from my orthopedic practice too. And so I was in a group in Asheville, where I live now, in North Carolina, and we had, well, I don't know, 10 surgeons, I think. And we
Mhm.
had an entire building. Imagine the overhead of this. We had an entire building, an entire floor of cubicles of staff trying to get reimbursed for procedures
I know.
all day long. It's all they did.
How many salaried employees, and I'm
Right.
not saying that the employees weren't worthy of having employment, but it's like what where we're putting our resources
Yeah.
to
And
be
people,
able.
I mean, it's just part of why is it so expensive? And it's like, look, like if you're, I mean, especially, I mean, orthopedic surgeons get paid well for their procedures, but even then there are a lot of procedures where if you have to pay somebody to sit on the phone for a couple of hours, your margin's gone.
Right.
Right. And so then you're basically operating for free, or you're paying to operate on somebody and expose yourself to risk. Like
Yes.
people wonder, like, why are doctors burned out? Why are private practices going away? And this is it's because the
Hmm.
insurance companies are making it so difficult, hospitals too, are making it so difficult to actually practice medicine. So even the most well-meaning doc can end up getting extremely frustrated, short with their patients because their livelihood is going away.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to bring that up too, because I think it's an important perspective that people don't understand, that insurance
Yeah.
companies are paying from the consumer perspective, but
Right.
they are every bit as painful from a provider perspective.
Oh, exactly. It's either side of the chair pretty much. And that's the interesting thing is that because we're looking at the provider in front of us or we're looking at the patient in front of us, we we can't help but feel it on a personal level, right? But really it has more to do with this whole other model that we're saying yes to
Yeah.
by subscribing to it. And I know it's challenging for some people to wrap their brains around, right? Because we're we're being fed a lot of fear in, well, if you don't participate in the insurance or you're gonna, that you're gonna go bankrupt, you're gonna lose your house, you're gonna da da da. And none of those things happen with practitioners who are very clear and upfront about like, here's what it is, here's the exchange, we're gonna figure this out and we're gonna invest in one another, right?
Right.
But from the point of what you were making before is that the practitioners end up actually having to pay for providing the service at the end of
Right.
the day because insurance typically, and I don't know, we don't want to go too deep on this, but like insurance is designed to create the resistance that causes people to
That's
have to
right.
want to spend or need to spend hours and hours and hours and hours. And if you don't agree, insurance sets a timeline. They start a timer at the time that it starts, and if they don't like it by a certain time, they can actually take money directly out of your account,
That's right.
right? They take the money
That's right.
right out of your account.
You're
And then
wrong.
right, exactly. It's like, wait, and so you provided all of these hours of service and you've paid all of these, the emergency room or the operating room staff, right? Anesthesiologists and all the nurses and all of the stuff to prep and all of that stuff, right? Down the tubes,
Yeah.
down the tubes.
Well, and so I mean, some policies, so state-run policies are notorious for such low reimbursement that
Yeah.
out of the gate that you're going to lose money, right? And
Hmm.
so that's where people say, well, why doesn't this practice take my insurance? And a lot of times that's the reason why, is that the reimbursement is so low that they are losing money on every single patient that has that type of
Right.
insurance that walks in the door. And that's really tough, because we shouldn't discriminate based on income, right? But
Right.
that is ultimately what it is, because these are less expensive policies. And so
Hmm.
we're creating this system where we are by definition
Hmm.
discriminating based on income,
Hmm.
and I'm pretty
Hmm.
sure we're not supposed to do that. So
Yeah.
it's really frustrating.
Yeah. Well, for me in my business model, I have always a percentage that is dedicated towards free or very low fee service. And I prioritize people who are marginalized on some
Hmm.
level. So it's super important to me. And I know it's not going to keep my lights on, but at the same
Right.
time, I acknowledge the fact that it's messy. This is a messy system. This is a messy
Yeah.
situation, and I never want to if it's the right match, right? I always just kind of feel like we're going to figure this out. And as long as it's that percentage and I have a boundary around that of the business, then everything else will work out. I trust in that. I totally
Yeah.
trust in that.
And we do the same, where we because I meet with all of my patients, and so everybody that's considering working with us, I meet with them personally.
Mm-hmm.
And you get that sense of, look, we need to work together, right? I just feel like
Yeah.
we need to work together, so
Yeah.
let's make it work, right? And
Right.
the challenge for us is that the cost of testing is so
Yeah.
high,
Yeah.
that even if I dropped it to, we're making $0, it's still expensive,
It's still an investment. Yeah.
yeah, and I guess I shouldn't use the word expensive. It's relative, but it is just costly. And
Yeah.
so we try to work with people whenever possible. And we're also actually trying to create other layers where, potentially do-it-yourself programs that'll provide
Hmm.
as much as we can through an avenue that isn't costly,
Hmm.
or this is how you can get the testing done, potentially somewhere else, or potentially even through your insurance, right? And we're not
Hmm.
going to do that,
Hmm.
but this is how you could potentially do that, or
Right.
group sessions, right? So there are
Yep.
ways that we can bring down the cost, and we're working on those models, particularly in the bone health arena to start.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I'm so happy to hear that. But I think the most important thing is that, swinging it back around to the benefits, right? So the
Right.
benefits are that when we get to the root level of where some of our underlying issues are, and I always say this, like, dis-ease is kind of like a seed that's planted, right? And we never really
Hmm.
know where the branches are going to grow. And so for many of us, especially when it comes to hormonal and metabolic health, um, you know, depending upon where we catch it, or where we might feel it, it's going to show up, and we can follow that down. And you follow that down to the point where you know where the issue lies, and you can address it at that level and
Hmm.
totally turn around someone's life. Totally
Right.
turn it around.
Right.
That's that's miraculous. That's what people want. That's what people are asking for and what they need. They just don't always realize that this is the way you get it.
Yeah,
Right?
well, we're just not that's not the that's not the message that we get, right? It's because all the messaging that most people are getting is, you have a symptom, here's a drug. You have
Mhm.
this is the right way to eat. No, it's this. No, it's this. No, it's this. And there's conflicting information, and then ultimately it's the big money drivers, which are, pharmaceuticals,
Mhm.
surgery. We have the solution for your symptom, not let's find the problem.
Mhm. Mhm. Right, exactly. But the benefit really at this point is the fact that you are helping people every single day to be able to live their lives in a way where they can enjoy it,
Yeah.
where their emotional, I'm sure it affects their emotional health as well, hormones especially.
Oh yeah.
Um, Adrenals and hormones, I mean, that gut health, that all of
And
those things go
those
hand in
three.
hand with emotional and mental health, right? So,
Mhm.
um, so how can people get in touch with you? Um,
Yeah, the best way is just to visit our website. It's optimalhumanhealth.com. That's
mm,
where we have all of the information that we have, very specifically, is on there. There's both a contact us form as well as our phone number and an email address.
okay, and so the way that they would start the process is just fill out the contact form, and there's a
Hmm.
questionnaire.
That's the
And
easiest way. Yeah.
yeah,
Hmm.
okay.
Yeah.
And the difference between you and maybe other functional medicine
Hmm.
practitioners is,
Yeah, functional medicine is it's a tough word. Same with integrative, right? So I kind of look at both of these when we were talking about what to
mm,
even call the business. What are we doing? And yes, we're integrative, but so is, having a puppy in your office. You're like, oh, we're an integrative practice. We have a therapy dog.
it's
I'm
true.
like, cool,
Yes.
that's great.
Yeah.
So integrative can mean anything, right? And
Yeah.
functional it's not that it can mean anything. It's just that there are so many different ways to be trained as a functional provider, that you can be a functional chiropractor, you can be a
Mhm.
functional, a functional anything. And what I worry about with that is, if you say, I'm going to go see a functional doctor and it's a chiropractor, and I have nothing against chiropractic,
Mhm.
but if what you need is a pharmaceutical or hormone replacement or
Right.
whatever that they don't have access to,
Right.
you're not going to get it, because if
Mhm.
they have a hammer, every patient that walks in the door is going to look like a nail, right? They're selling you a
Yep.
service. So
Yep.
what I look at us and say, look, we are a physician-led service that has access to the full spectrum of controlled substances, hormone replacement, pharmaceuticals, peptides, wholesale supplements, and we also do the lifestyle piece with coaching with registered dietitians.
Mhm.
We can do anything. and we
Mhm.
focus on certain things, but we can do anything. And I think that's what you really need to look for, whether it's us or with somebody else. That's really what you need to look for, because
Mhm.
otherwise you kind of get stuck in whatever that person has at it,
Right.
in their tool belt. And I see it all the time, especially in the bone health world, is that people will come in and they say, well, I'm on this topical progesterone and estrogen cream, and it's a super low over the counter dose, and they think that they're getting enough, and they're just not, and because nobody's testing it, and there's no
Mhm.
way you can get enough through that kind of cream. And they think, well, I'm saving my bones with this estrogen. Well, no, you're not. But you went to a
Mm.
chiropractor that couldn't prescribe bioidentical hormones, right? So that's what you're going to get. And
Right.
so again, it's just like, look for somebody that can do anything, but
Mhm.
that you have
Mhm.
to then agree with what their approach is going to be, and then all that empowered and education piece that we talked about.
Yeah, and from the flip side of that, just another thing to consider is I hear this all the time. I don't want to have to go through this again. I don't want
Mm,
to have to go through all the testing and the
hmm.
explanation, and
Hmm.
it's really it's exhausting, right?
Absolutely.
It's exhausting to not feel good and then have to go through the whole thing and
Hmm.
explain and answer the questions and fill out the form that takes you 2 hours and go to the labs and do the testing and
Yeah.
reinvest the money and all of that stuff. So to your point, it's good to really just go to somebody who has that full spectrum
Right.
of
Yeah.
capacity, and that's one of the reasons why I have so many different acronyms after my name, because it's like I really wanted to make sure that I could provide as many different ways to be able to help somebody, so that when they come to me, we're able to really do as much as we can. We've got a lot in the wheelhouse, right?
Yeah.
And that's why I also love working with doctors like you, because then we know that the integrity is there. We know that the capacity and the capability of being able to help somebody get to the root cause of that issue, instead of just trying to make money off of a supplement or something like that. So I really appreciate what you do. I was so excited when, we were connected, because I just thought, oh my gosh, this is going to be such a great conversation. And I really hope that our community gets a lot out of it. I know that they will. And I hope that you reach out to Dr. Doug, because I know he's very responsive and, such a great resource. He also has an Instagram account where he provides some tips as well. And as usual, please like and subscribe, send any comments to us. Make sure you write a review if you haven't already on any of the audio platforms. And we appreciate you being here today. And until the next time, lots of peace and love and good health, right?
Thanks, Sharon.
Thank you.